Hello friends, I am Dr. Rajesh Chokhani, a general pediatrician from Bandra, and today we will be talking about abdominal pain. So abdominal pain has always been a tough enigma to crack for us physicians. But once again, a good history and a systematic clinical approach guides us in most of the cases. To localize the anatomy, we must first focus on the site of the pain. Localized pain in any quadrant is always pathological and generally relates to the anatomical placement of the organs in that quadrant. So for example, epigastric pain could arise from the stomach, the liver or the pancreas. In the previous video, Dr. Amdekar explained about visceral and parietal pain. So the next step is to find out whether this pain is dull aching and poorly localized, which suggests visceral pain, or sharp and well localized, which suggests parietal pain. Because if it is visceral pain, it could also arise from an organ which shares the same embryological dermatome, and in this regard Dr. Amdekar explained how the pain of acute appendicitis can start in the umbilical region and then move to the right iliac fossa. Besides this pain, all other pains in the periumbilical region are usually chronic and usually benign. Besides the site of the pain, we must also inquire about the character of the pain, the severity, the radiation, the temporal description of the pain over a length of time, its aggravating and relieving factors, because all these will add to valuable insights. So a colicky pain suggests the involvement of a tubular structure, mostly the intestines, but at times maybe the ureter. If this pain is radiating from the loin to the groin, it suggests a ureteric colic. Even if there is no radiation, but if there is an associated symptom of hematuria, it again points to a ureteric colic. Pathologically, a pain which is mild dull aching may suggest that the capsule of a solid organ is getting stretched or a hollow viscus is getting distended. An acute severe pain with associated tenderness suggests inflammation in the underlying organ, as we see in acute appendicitis or a liver abscess or in pancreatitis. Abdominal pain that comes up later in the course of a disease, unexpectedly, when the initial fever seems to be settling down, as in dengue fever, suggests a vasogenic pain. A pain which comes up very suddenly suggests a mechanical etiology, like a ureteric colic or a gallstone in an adult, or intussusception in a child, or an obstructed hernia at any age. Abdominal pain can usually be acute or chronic. Acute abdominal pain is often severe and we have to rule out a serious underlying condition. Presence of other associated symptoms makes this a little easier, and some of these symptoms could be red flags. For example, bilious vomiting, abdominal distension or blood in stools. On examination, red flag signs could be guarding and rigidity. But at times, abdominal pain is the sole symptom, and at such times it may become a little more challenging to pinpoint the cause. Especially at such times, we must focus on abnormal vital signs like an unexplained tachycardia, or especially in an adult, a little hypotension or a little hypoxia, which may not otherwise be obvious clinically, to tell us that this pain could be a serious underlying reason. We must also remember that the cause of abdominal pain could be outside the abdomen. For example, it could be a medical emergency like a diabetic ketoacidosis, and here again, deep rapid breathing with a fruity odor could be a clue. Or the pain could be due to referred pain due to a right lower lobe pneumonia, or it could be due to a pelvic or a gynecological cause in a young lady. Obviously, all these situations warrant immediate investigation and further treatment accordingly. Recurrent or chronic abdominal pain is often a diagnostic dilemma. It has been called the Pandora's box only because the list of possible causes is long and you never know what you might find. Though we are worried about missing something important, it is impractical to investigate everybody for everything. In most cases, the underlying cause is benign. So to filter that minority who needs investigations, a detailed history and a thorough clinical examination is crucial. Besides the red flags that we already spoke about, we must also focus on weight loss in an adult, or a disturbed growth chart in a child, or a pain that wakes up a child from sleep, or unexplained fevers, or dysphagia, significant vomiting, hematemesis, or chronic severe or nocturnal diarrhea or melena, or jaundice, organomegaly, or any other abnormal physical finding. If none of these are present, and if the description of the pain matches what we are going to discuss in the next minute or so, then it could possibly be a benign cause and we could wait. Further, we must always try to determine the functional impairment caused by the pain. So if there has been no impact of the pain on the adult's working or on the child's play or school, we can wait and watch. The commonest causes of chronic abdominal pain or recurrent abdominal pain in children are functional abdominal pain and habitual constipation. And in adults, the commonest causes are irritable bowel syndrome and functional dyspepsia. In children, typically, the history in functional abdominal pain dates back to months or years without disturbing the well-being or the growth of the child. The pain could be once in a few days or it could be many times a day. The intensity is never severe enough to disturb the child's play or sleep. The duration of the pain is usually short lasting so that the child mentions about it and soon forgets and continues to do his or her activity. Typically on examination, everything seems to be normal. In habitual constipation, the history of the pain is quite similar. So, the key to the diagnosis is getting the history of inadequate defecation. This history has to be extracted because once children get older and start visiting the washroom on their own, their parents are unaware of the details and the children themselves give unreliable descriptions. So, a history of passing stools not necessarily every day, 2. A history of passing stools 2-3 times a day, 2. A history of passing stools not at the same time generally every day, 2. Visiting the washroom for a long time each time, 2. Coming out within 2 minutes but going again later in the day. All these are variable descriptions of habitual constipation. Besides this, the history of an imbalanced diet in the form of inadequate fiber and the fact that they don't have time in the morning to visit the washroom because of morning school. These two things add to the diagnosis of habitual constipation. On examination, of course, we may find a mild generalized gaseous distension or we may find fecal masses in the left iliac fossa. Recurrent epigastric pain could be due to acid peptic disease or functional dyspepsia. Whether it's children or adults, the distinction between organic and functional is often very difficult. Even H. pylori is often overdiagnosed and overtreated. In fact, if specific antibiotic therapy does not relieve the patient's pain, the recommended second line of treatment in H. pylori is antidepressants. So therefore, in all such cases, we must make an attempt to note irregularities in lifestyle, like an indisciplined content and timing of meals, inadequate sleep and exercise, and try to correct these lifestyle aberrations. Randomly prescribing PPIs is an abuse if we don't look at these lifestyle aberrations. The hallmark of irritable bowel syndrome in adults is chronic abdominal pain with a change in bowel habits. Chronic parasitic infections like amoebiasis and giardiasis or worm infestations partly depend on the hygiene of the family but are also probably overdiagnosed and overtreated. Abdominal USG is often used as a screening test to pick up any significant abnormality. Often lymph nodes are reported which may not necessarily be pathological. So it becomes very important to carefully clinically interpret whether the pain can be caused by these lymph nodes. The best way forward possibly is a follow-up examination of the patient and a follow-up investigation if necessary. There are many other findings on USG like a calcification in the liver or a free fluid in the pouch of Douglas or a thickened bladder wall in children, which again mostly have no clinical relevance in most of the cases. Symptomatic treatment of abdominal pain should be considered only if the severity of the pain merits it. Antispasmodics and analgesics are not synonymous, and we must think and decide which one to use when. We must also make an effort to explore the underlying factors that may be contributing to functional pain and try to address them. Therefore, in all such cases, counseling becomes extremely important. So friends, to summarize, abdominal pain can be due to a variety of causes, but we can certainly hope to be rational by using a systematic approach. After all, hope was the only thing that was left in the mythological Pandora's box. Thank you. The next video will be by Dr. Khare on headache and invisible symptom.